executive editor, Occupy Democrats, talking about, the Trump indictment and his thoughts. And now we have a man on the line with us right now who is actually running for presidency, the president of the United States. Of course, you know him as a nationally syndicated conservative talk show host. He also ran for office and tried to out Gavin Newsom. And certainly we appreciate his time. Joining us right now is conservative talk show host, and as I mentioned, presidential candidate Larry Elder joining us right now. Mr. Elder, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for the time. How are you?
I'm doing well, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We appreciate that. So I guess my first question to you before we get into Donald Trump, before we get into the indictment and some national issues, tell me why, Mr. Elder, you decided to put your name in the ring, so to speak, and you're running for president of the United States.
Well, because I believe that our side, meaning the Republican side, is not talking enough about some issues that I think are really, really vital to the country. I'm running as a America First guy, Make America Great Again guy. So the question is, what's the point? And the point is, we have an epidemic of fatherlessness in this country. 3 times as many American kids enter the world today without a father in the home, married to the mother. 70% of Black kids do, 50% of white kids, Hispanic kids do, 25% of white kids do, which was the same percentage as to Blacks back in 1965 when Lyndon Johnson, a Democrat, launched a so-called war on poverty, Brian. And since then, in my opinion, we've incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And the numbers are clear. If you're raised without a father, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. That is not to denigrate the hard job that single moms and sometimes grandparents are doing raising these kids without fathers, but it certainly is much more difficult. And I've got ideas about what we can do about that. The other reason I'm running is because of this lie that Democrats have been pushing for years, which is that America remains systemically racist. It's not only pushing stuff like reparations, which in my view is the extraction of money from people who were never slaves to be given to people who were never slave owners. It's pushing stuff like race-based preferences, DEI, and more importantly, it's getting people killed. It's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect, which is the phenomenon of cops pulling back all over the country in major cities. As a result, there are thousands of people who are dead who otherwise would not be dead if the police were doing their normal proactive policing. And finally, there is this meltdown, this disaster known as K through 12 urban education, where, just to pick one city, Baltimore, there are 13 public high schools in Baltimore, all located in the inner city. I kid you not, Brian, where 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. Now, what can help that is school choice. Democrats oppose it, even as their elites, whether it's Barack Obama or Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton, all have their own kids in private school, Gavin Newsom, but they do not want urban kids to have the same opportunity. So if I can put those issues front and center, even if I'm not the nominee, even if you want somebody else, I will feel I've done my service to my country. That's why I'm asking people to go to my website, LarryElder.com. You can contribute as little as $1, Brian, to get me on that debate stage on August 23rd. I've got to have 40,000 individual donors. Right. They can contribute as little as $1 for me to qualify. So please, if you care about those issues, get me up there. And once I get up there, it's game on, hold my beer.
So, Mr. Elder, I agree with a lot of what you just said. I think you would still agree with me that sadly there are some racist people out there, and there are hate crimes, and sadly there's still racism that exists in society. But with that being said, the things that you just mentioned, I don't hear a lot of Republicans talking about those issues. I hear a lot of Republicans talking about drag queen reading to kids, which to me is not the issue that some Republicans make it out to be. Critical race theory, indoctrinating our children. They want to take away a woman's right to choose. Those are a lot of the topics that I see a lot of other Republicans talking about. And I think it hurts the Republican Party. I really do. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, let me take issue with a couple of things you said. Obviously, there are racists in America. The question is whether or not racism is big enough, significant enough to hold back anybody who's willing to work hard, graduate from high school, don't have a kid until you get married, get a job, keep a job, and avoid the criminal justice system. If you do those things, you will not be poor. You know, there was a poll, Brian, in 2002. 8% of Americans believe Elvis is still alive, or there's a chance that he is. So you have to write off around 30 million Americans out of the gate. But as far as other Republicans are concerned, I can't speak for other Republicans. I can speak for the people that I talk to on the campaign trail in Iowa, in New Hampshire, where I've been recently, and they care about the economy, they care about inflation, they care about gas prices, They care about crime. They care about the quality of their schools. They care about the borders. That's what I'm talking about. And frankly, that's what I think most of the candidates are talking about. Obviously, when you talk about the trans issue, stuff like that, the left goes crazy and they put you in a little box. They call you intolerant. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the bread and butter issues that most Americans are talking about across the kitchen table.
So the reality, though, I think you'll agree with me, is that Donald Trump is the front runner. He is the face of the Republican Party. I mean, he is. I mean, that's just a reality. And with that reality is now a third indictment. Donald Trump now a third indictment by Jack Smith yesterday. You know what's going on, Mr. Elder. He is still the leader of your party. I mean, he's even beating Ron DeSantis by 20 points in Florida. So I want to ask you about that. How do you feel about the face of your party now facing now a third indictment? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, when you say the face of my party, he's the face of the party today. I voted for Mitt Romney. I voted for the governor from the senator from Arizona, John McCain. I voted for George W. Bush. I voted for George Herbert Walker Bush. And at some point, he will no longer, quote, be the face of our party. Our party is about limited government, low taxes, low regulation, strong borders, and pro-life. And those are the issues that drive the Republican Party. And at some point, there'll be a different, quote unquote, face of the party. But as to your question, he's going to probably face a fourth indictment. I think the Georgia is probably going to indict him as well. I think the indictment yesterday is BS. What Donald Trump did was complain about the 2020 election, the same thing Hillary did about 2016. For the entirety of President Trump's term, Brian, Hillary referred to him as illegitimate, called the election stolen, joined with Jill Stein to file a lawsuit to overturn the election in Wisconsin, filed a separate brief in order to have the recount done by hand. Nobody accused her of undermining our republic.
Was there a fake electorate scheme, though? I mean, last I checked, Hillary conceded the following day, and there wasn't a fake electorate scheme. And I read the indictment. Donald Trump went way above and beyond, as you know, based on this indictment, in this fake electorate scheme.
I'm sorry. I disagree with you. Donald Trump challenged the election in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and several other states, I think with good reason. More importantly, Donald Trump offered a theory about the Electoral Count Act that the courts did not take up. But lawyers offer theories all the time. At one point, the lawyer defending Dred Scott offered a theory that was not bought by the Supreme Court. The lawyers that opposed separate but equal offered a theory that was not adopted. People offer theories that are not popular. And by the way, in last year, at the end of last year, Congress changed the Electoral Count Act to make it, quote unquote, clear that Pence did not have the authority to overturn the election that Donald Trump said he had.
Let me ask you a question.
No, wait. This is very important, Brian. If the theory that Donald Trump was offering was bogus, was empty, was fallacious, which is what Jack Smith said, why then would you clarify the law under which he made the argument if it was so obvious that what Donald Trump was doing was wrong?
Well, because I disagree with you. I don't think it's a theory. If I have a theory that the earth is flat, that's not a theory. It's just a lie. And I think most people would call me an idiot. Donald Trump didn't come up with theories. He lied. The election was not stolen.
I'm sorry. I know the lawyer that made the argument. His name is John Eastman. I defy you to interview him.
Who was a co-conspirator. He's not talking to many members of the media now. He's a co-conspirator in Jack Smith's indictment case. He's in a lot of legal trouble.
You're not even a lawyer, Brian. You have no idea what you're talking about. John Eastman is the former dean of Chapman University. He made an argument that under the Electoral Count Act, that Donald Trump could pressure Vice President Mike Pence into overturning the election in several states, putting it back in those state legislatures. And by the way, I don't buy the theory, but it's a theory that's a legitimate theory that he pushed. And again, Congress changed the law to make it clear that vice presidents did not have the power to do what Donald Trump suggested. If it's clear that Donald Trump did not have the right to do that, why in the world would you have to change the law to clarify it, Brian?
Well, first of all, I would, to your first point, I don't think you have to be an attorney to understand that Donald Trump has been lying about the 2020 election. I don't think there's any reasonable person with an IQ over 20 that thinks that Donald Trump actually thinks he won the election. There was no evidence of widespread voter fraud. You don't have to be an attorney to know that Donald Trump has been lying about that. You also don't have to be an attorney to know that if he didn't lie about it, January 6th doesn't happen. Even though he hasn't been charged with incitement, let me ask you a question. If Donald Trump didn't say months before January 6th that the election was stolen and didn't say that Democrats cheated and Joe Biden cheated, which, by the way, they didn't, does January 6th still happen? Yes or no?
I'm sorry. Did Hillary lie when she said that Donald Trump?
Why do you bring up Hillary Clinton? I'm asking you a question now
because you're being inconsistent. You're being a phony.
That's what about it?
You're engaging in selective outrage. You know, when people on the left say whataboutism, what they're doing is dodging their hypocrisy, dodging their double standards, dodging their selective outrage. Hillary, for 4 years, called Donald Trump illegitimate. Was she lying, Brian?
Okay, so first of all,
was she lying?
I will answer.
Was she lying?
I will answer your question, even though you didn't answer mine.
I'm happy to answer yours after you answer mine. You go first. Was she lying? Was Jimmy Carter lying when he called, when he said the Russians put Donald Trump in office? Was Hakeem Jeffries lying when he referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate?
I'll answer your question about Hillary Clinton. First of all, she conceded the following day. Second of all, she didn't incite an insurrection. Democrats didn't storm the Capitol. It's not a fair analogy.
You didn't answer my question. Was she lying?
Was she lying about what? That it was an illegitimate.
Am I stuttering? Am I stuttering? Was she lying when she referred to Donald Trump as having stolen the election? Her word, not mine. Was she lying when she said Donald Trump was illegitimately elected? Okay, her words, not mine. Was she?
So here's the difference between you and me. I can call out both sides. If Hillary Clinton did say that,
what do you mean if she said it? She said it over and over and over again.
And I'm answering.
There's no if about it.
Even though I don't think I think it's a false comparison. If Hillary did say that, then she's wrong. And any Democrat that would say that Donald Trump illegitimately won the 2016 election is wrong. So now I go back to my question that I asked you. I just answered your question. And by the way, I'm not a Democrat. I'm a registered independent. I lean to the left.
Please. When was the last time you voted for a Republican?
In 2022, in the midterm elections, I voted for 8 Republicans. So now you have.
When's the last time you voted for? When's the last time you voted for a Republican for president, Brian?
I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. I didn't vote for Barack Obama. I supported Mitt Romney. I supported John McCain. So I preach to what you just said. You don't know what you're talking about, and you don't know anything about my voting record. I'm a registered independent, and I'm anti-Donald Trump. It's why I voted for Joe Biden, and it's why millions of Americans voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump. Not because we're huge Joe Biden fans, because we didn't want to vote for Donald Trump. Now, let me go back and ask the question again that you refused to answer. I'll ask it again. If Donald Trump didn't lie and say the election was stolen months before January 6th, does January 6th still happen? Yes or no?
Donald Trump did not lie. Donald Trump made a First Amendment argument that the election, in his view, was stolen based upon shenanigans that took place in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, and Wisconsin. We can go into depth about all those states. As far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump did not lie. Donald Trump offered his opinion. Hillary Clinton, for one more time, has referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate for 4 years. Hakeem Jeffries, who took over from Nancy Pelosi, referred to Donald Trump as illegitimate. Former President Jimmy Carter claimed the Russians put him in the White House. All these people made these arguments. Nobody called them liars. People assumed they had an opinion, a First Amendment opinion, and Donald Trump has a First Amendment opinion.
I believe Donald Trump is illegitimate, not because I believe the election was stolen, based on his behaviors, based on the things he said, based on the things he's done. Let me ask you another question.
No. I want to ask you a question.
Sure. Brian. Ask me anything you want.
Thank you, sir. The Homeland Security Secretary, Jay Johnson, under Obama, testified under oath that the Russians tried, but they failed to change a single vote tally. They tried, but failed to change a single vote tally. There's a YouGov poll came out in 2018, respected. 66% of Democrats believe the Russians, quote, change vote tallies, close quote, in order to elect Donald Trump. That's how deluded Democrats are regarding what happened in 2016. According to Gallup, 78% of Democrats believe the Russian interference altered the outcome of the election, even though Jay Johnson says he has no idea whether or not the interference altered the outcome of the election. And there was a big study done by NYU that found the Russian interference had a barely measurable effect, close quote, on the election. My point is, a greater percentage of Democrats believe 2016 was stolen. Republicans who feel the same way about 2020. How do you feel about that? Does that bother you?
It bothers me when anybody puts out misinformation, and I'd have to look at that Gallup poll, and I'd have to look at how many people were.
I'm happy to send it to you. I have your email address. I'll send it to you both days.
Because I haven't seen that, but I will answer.
No, you haven't seen it because you haven't talked to anybody like Larry Elder before, who'll tell you that the left is deluded about 2016, has been referring to Donald Trump as a fascist and a Nazi and a tyrant, and it's outrageous. And I would like to see some outrage that you have towards the left that you have toward Donald Trump.
Okay, so first of all, anybody who uses the term Nazi, left or right, it's abhorrent and it's disgusting. My last name is Shapiro. I happen to be Jewish. Marjorie Taylor Greene, using the term Nazi, talking about kids wearing masks, just as bad as anybody on the left who would use the term Nazi to describe Donald Trump. It's wrong, and that word should never be used ever.
I couldn't agree with you more. We agree on that. And by the way, in 1964, when Barry Goldwater was nominated as a Republican nominee, the Democrat governor of California, Pat Brown, said, and I'm quoting, "The stench of fascism is in the air," end of quote. When Ronald Reagan ran in 1980, a congressman from Missouri said that Ronald Reagan got his, quote, "fascist precepts from the pages of Mein Kampf," close quote. George Soros said that when he hears George W. Bush say, "Either you're with me or you're with the terrorists," it reminds me of Joseph Goebbels, who's the propagandist under Adolf Hitler. My point is the left has been using this kind of rhetoric for years and years and years, and I'm hoping, Brian, that you are equally outraged about that as you are about Donald Trump.
Okay, well, as I've said, if anybody uses the term Nazi, left or right, it's disgusting and it's wrong. But you're a smart man, and I find it hard to believe that you won't admit that Donald Trump continues to lie about the 2020 election. There's literally zero evidence. There's zero evidence.
The definition of a lie is an intentional intent to deceive. Donald Trump is Donald Trump. Donald Trump believes that the election was stolen. You can hook him up to a polygraph, and I assure you, he will be found to be truthful. That's what he believes.
There are people that have testified under oath that have worked under Donald Trump that disagree with you, that have testified under oath that they say that Donald Trump knew that he lost the election, yet he still continues to spread lies about the 2020 election. You actually believe that Donald Trump believes that he won the 2020 election?
You asked me the question. You can answer it a million times if you want, Brian. Do I believe that Donald Trump believes that the election was stolen? Yes, Donald Trump believes that. He believes that there were shenanigans in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, all of which conspired to make him lose that election. And don't tell me that you don't believe that there was misconduct in the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story. One study found that there were 16 to 17% of Biden voters in about 7 or 8 swing states that say had they known about the Hunter Biden laptop story, they would not have voted for Hunter Biden. What about the money that Zuckerberg spent, the $400 million that Zuckerberg spent?
Well, if you want to talk about money, we can do that. Let's talk about money. What about the $2 billion that Jared Kushner received from the Saudis? Why don't I ever hear people like that?
I'm happy you raised that question. One of the things I'm going to do once I become president, Brian, I hope you support me on this, is to sign an executive order that will stop presidents and vice presidents and their families from lobbying for 5 years, whether it's a Democrat, whether it's a Republican.
I back you 100% on that. But the argument I make with a lot of Republicans out there is they want to talk about Burisma and Hunter Biden.
Well, you're talking to a Republican named Larry Elder, so make your arguments to be not to unnamed Republicans, just as I can do unnamed Democrats as well.
No problem. Let's do that, Mr. Elder. No problem. Why don't I hear people talking? They want to talk about Burisma, and I would imagine you've talked about Hunter Biden and the money that he made off of Burisma, and we all know what happened there, right? He's using the last name of his father. We know that, any logical person. But why don't I hear the same about Jared Kushner? I applaud you for wanting to pass those type of laws, which I would agree with you on. But I want to hear the same on both sides. If you have a problem,
I have said the same thing. I don't care who it is, whether it's Neil Bush or whether it's Jared Kushner, it's all wrong, which is why I'm signing the executive order. As for why the others are not doing it, you have to talk to them. Why aren't the Democrats talking about the fact that Hillary Clinton got it passed when she had an unsecured server in her basement on which she sent and received classified information, 30,000 emails that were destroyed under subpoena. She got a slap on the wrist by the FEC for the Steele dossier that she paid for. Donald Trump paid money to Stormy Daniels. He listed that as a legal expense, as did Hillary, and he's facing criminal charges from the Manhattan DA. It is unfair. It's a two-tier justice system. Why am I not hearing that from people on the left?
If it is true a two-tier justice system, Jack Smith is a guy who's prosecuted Democrats, including Edwards and others. If it truly is a two-tier justice system, can it be possible that maybe Jack Smith is doing his job and he's a good man and Donald Trump may have broken the law?
I think that Jack Smith probably feels, not probably, no doubt feels what he's doing is the right thing. And I know John Eastman, co-conspirator number 2, known him for a number of years, and he felt that he was making legitimate legal arguments that the Electoral Count Act allowed the Vice President Pence to overturn certain elections in certain states. Both can be true. Both can be honorable men who made good faith arguments. I happen to feel that that Donald Trump is being subjected to a two-tier justice system. I'll give you another example. Right now, Donald Trump is facing indictment over the way he handled certain documents.
Right.
There's a special counsel looking into Hunter Biden, to Joe Biden's documents in 5 different areas, 5 different locations. And where's the result? Why is that investigation taking forever?
The big difference between Joe Biden and his attorneys actually did what the FBI asked them to do, and Donald Trump defied a subpoena for 16 months. Do you not see that?
That is a difference, but another difference is this.
Kind of a big one, don't you think, Mr. Elder? Kind of a big one when you defy a subpoena for 16 months.
I'll give you a big one. Please tell me how Joe Biden got into his hands documents when he was a senator, not president, from a SCIF. A SCIF is an area where you can either take in or take out documents. Somehow he ends up with documents that were taken out of a SCIF. That's a big deal, don't you think? Why is the investigation taking forever?
So here's what I'll say to that again. Why is Donald Trump defying a subpoena? Why is it that Joe Biden did not do that? Is cooperated. His attorneys have cooperated. And why do we have on audio recordings Donald Trump showing classified documents of the highest to people that don't have security clearances? Why is it, sir, that Donald Trump continues to lie about this, continues to say that he had the right to do it, which he didn't, defies a subpoena, and now we're learning allegedly tried to get rid of evidence that could help prosecute him?
One more time. I think a former senator having in his hands documents he obtained from a SCIF is more serious than what Donald Trump allegedly did. And virtually every single president, to my knowledge, has taken records out, and normally they're handled with a negotiation with the proper federal authorities. I don't know why Donald Trump had to be subjected to a raid at Mar-a-Lago the way he did. I think it's a double standard.
Why did he defy the subpoena? Why did he just give up?
He made objections that he thought were lawful to a subpoena that he thought was overbroad. That's why. Lawyers disagree. Lawyers disagree.
Well, lawyers that are representing Donald Trump on the far right would probably disagree with you. I think most attorneys in this country would disagree with the premise that Donald Trump didn't do anything wrong. And if I know you read the indictment.
I didn't say he didn't do anything wrong. I said normally these things are resolved in a matter of negotiation with the proper authorities, the way they've been resolved with other presidents in the past.
So what is your distinction between Donald Trump? What is the difference? You're running for president. What is the difference between Larry Elder and two Republicans out there? Why should people vote for you over Donald Trump?
I am, as I said before, I'm running as a America First guy, a Make America Great Again guy, but there are issues that we need to put front and center that are not being put front and center. Most notably, the lie that America remains systemically racist is getting people killed. It's called the Ferguson effect or the George Floyd effect. That is, Brian, the phenomenon of cops pulling back from their normal proactive policing. As a result, in cities all over America, there are thousands of people who are dead who otherwise wouldn't be dead if it weren't for that lie Democrats have been pushing. Then there is the epidemic of fatherlessness. 40% of American kids now enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. 70% of black kids, and the stats are clear. If you're raised without a dad, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime. 9 times.
Can't both be true? That I agree with you that we need to have better families in the
homes. May I finish? You asked me a question why I'm running. I'm trying to answer your question.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
And the other thing is the absolute meltdown of urban education, where there are 13 public high schools to pick one city in Baltimore, where 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. If I can put those issues front and center, I will feel that I've given back to my party. More importantly, I feel that I've given back to my country. And that is why I'm running.
And listen, I applaud you for that. All I'm simply saying is, can't both be true? Can't there be issues in the home where you need a mother and father to raise a child to give them a better chance to make it in society? But can't there also be systemic racism? Ahmad Aubry, for example.
Okay, Brian. Give me the systemic racism. Give me the most blatant example, in your opinion, of systemic racism. Give it to me.
Okay, so that's a loaded question, but I'll try to answer.
Loaded nothing. You said systemic racism. What is it? What is it? Name it. Tell me what it is.
In this country, first of all, why is it that people that are black are not getting paid the same as people that are white?
That's a lie. That's a lie. What do you mean? Give me your study. Give me your study that proves that.
Okay, so you're telling
the same work
as a whole.
Brian. Let me show you how stupid what it is you just now said. Okay. If I'm running a business and I can hire black people to be equally productive and pay them less money, I'd be a fool to hire white people.
So in this country, you're telling me that as a whole, black people are paid the same as white people. Is that what you're telling me?
You know what? You don't do it that way. You compare apples to apples. As a whole, do black people make less money than white people? Yes, because as a whole, black people have less education. Fewer of them have majored in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But if you ask me apples to apples, if I'm an engineer at IBM and the white engineer at IBM, we've been there the same length of time, there's no difference in our salaries. If you can show me the study that shows black people doing the same work, equally productive,
well, I'm just giving you
I'd like to see it.
Why have we only had one black president? Why are there so few black people that are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies? Why are there so few people?
So in other words, because there's inequality, ergo systemic racism, that's bonehead. Why are there so few white people in the NBA? Why are there so few white people in the NFL?
Well, that's not racism. That might be because black people as a whole might be better athletes than white people.
So therefore, your assertion that there are not as many black CEOs is one can explain that.
I'm asking you why. I'm asking you why. Why is it that there are so few?
No, I'm sorry. You're the one who claims systemic racism. Now you're asking me why.
Sure,
your job is to prove what you just now said, and you can't do it. Prove to me that the number of black CEOs not being the number that you wanted to be is because of systemic racism.
Well, somebody in your party, Mr. Scott, said that he's been pulled over because of the color of his skin. Have you heard stories of people pulled over because they're white? Have you heard anybody say I was pulled over because I'm white?
I've heard a lot of people say they got pulled over because of the color of my hair. I have long hair. I have tattoos. Do you know anybody from the 60s and from the 70s who's white who's been pulled over because cops happen not to like how they're dressed? Are you under a rock somewhere, Brian?
No, I'm not. Are you under a rock? I think you're under a rock. Tim Scott said it himself that he was pulled over because of the color of his skin.
You want me to respond? You want me to respond to what Tim Scott said?
Sure, please do.
During 2013, under Barack Obama, there was a study done by the National Institutes of Justice, which is the research arm of the DOJ, called Race and Traffic Stops. I urge you to take a look at it. And it is true that blacks are disproportionately pulled over compared to whites.
Isn't that systemic racism?
May I finish what I'm going to say?
Sure.
Brian?
Sure, go right ahead.
It's also true that blacks commit more traffic offenses. If the driver is a speeder, the likelihood is that a black person is more likely to speed than a white person. The study also found that blacks were more likely not to have the required license plate, not likely to have a car seat in the back, not likely to have a safety belt on. Black people were committing traffic offenses at a greater percentage than white people, which accounts for why they were pulled over. According to the NIJ study, Race and Traffic Stop, that came out under Barack Obama. Go and read it.
Let me ask you a very basic question. And
so you still haven't answered my question. Give me the systemic racism. And you're talking about inequality, and inequality and systemic racism are two very different things.
If Ahmad Aubry was white, he would not have been lynched. There are.
Say again?
I'm sorry?
Say again?
If Ahmad Aubry was white, he would still be alive today. If George Floyd was white, he would still be alive today.
Okay, all right. Let me just take one of let's take one of them, because the George Floyd one is huge.
Sure.
There were 4 months worth of protests, as you know, in the streets of America, starting in May of 2020. 35 people killed, 2,000 police officers injured, $2 billion worth of damage.
No reasonable person would condone that behavior.
Okay, good. The George Floyd trial was on television. I'm sure you watched part of it.
Yes, absolutely.
The opening statement was made by the lead prosecutor, who was a black man. And in his opening statement, and I'm a trial lawyer, the most important part of a trial is the opening statement. The second most part of a trial is the closing statement. In the opening statement, he took pains to say that the police in general were not on trial, that the Minneapolis Police Department was not on trial. This individual named Derek Chauvin was on trial, and he never argued that what Derek Chauvin did had anything to do with George Floyd's race. In fact, Derek Chauvin was never charged with a hate crime. So here you have the lead prosecutor never making an argument that what Derek Chauvin did or didn't do had anything whatever to do with George Floyd's race. Let me finish. That you had 4 months worth of protests on the bogus assumption that George Floyd was mistreated because of his race. He was clearly mistreated, but there's zero evidence that the mistreatment had anything to do with his race. And people like you pushing the notion that what happened to George Floyd was because of his race are the very people who are making this country worse, and the very people that were inciting the people in the streets of American cities all over the place that caused $2 billion worth of damage, including damaging black businesses and hurting black neighborhoods and property values for years.
Mr. Elder, out of the tens of millions of people that were protesting, there were a percentage of people that committed violent crimes and acts which no reasonable person would condone.
Not the point. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is the protest had to do with the assumption that what happened to George Floyd had to do with his race. When the lead prosecutor, when the lead prosecutor, who was a black man, never said anything even remotely like that, and never even argued that what happened to George Floyd happened because of his race, and Derek Chauvin was never charged with a hate crime.
Okay, yes, but just because he wasn't charged with a hate crime doesn't necessarily mean that race wasn't a factor at all. So I want to ask you a question.
No, I'm sorry. Where in the trial did it say race was a factor?
That was not on the charges that were filed.
No. It's in your head, Brian, because that's how you see the world.
Well, let me tell you
the damage that this mindset does. There's a website called policemag.com. And people who are self-described as very liberal were asked, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? Let me ask you, how many unarmed black men do you believe the police killed in 2019?
Just because unarmed black men are not killed at the rate that some people like you to believe doesn't.
Do you want to answer my question? How many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019, Brian?
11 or 12. I don't know the exact number.
Okay. Self-described very liberal people thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men.
I didn't say that. Now
I know you didn't. I'm telling you what self-described very liberal people assume. And the answer, Brian, is 12. The answer is 12.
Right. So
that's the gap between what people think is going on versus what is really going on because of this notion that America remains systemically racist. It's a false notion, and it's making the country worse.
Just like you don't speak for all Republicans, I don't speak for liberals. And what I'm asking you is if George Floyd was white, you believe the same exact thing would have happened?
I have no idea. I know this.
Right.
Let me finish. I know this. There was no evidence that what Derek Chauvin did had to do with George Floyd's race. For example, we had this incident on the subway in New York recently that retired Marine Daniel Penny choked to death Jordan Neely, right? Protests all over the place because of the assumption that what Daniel Penny did had to do with Jordan Neely's race. What's your evidence of that? Are you telling me that if Jordan Neely had been white and had been making menacing comments, Daniel Penny would have said, well, "Okay, well, that's a white guy. I think I'll just sit here and
first of all, I didn't make that claim, but what I will say is he was a vigilante, and he shouldn't have chokeholded him.
Call it what you want. The question is whether or not he was motivated because of Jordan Neely's race. Zero evidence that this Marine would have sat in his hands.
I'm not talking about that case. I'm talking about the George Floyd case, and you're saying you don't think race was a factor at all.
I'm talking about how people assume things falsely because of this bogus narrative that America remains systemically racist. It happened with George Floyd. It happened with Jordan Neely and Daniel Penny. Many people are assuming that what Daniel Penny did had to do with Jordan Neely's race when there's zero evidence at all.
Well, Penny isn't a convicted murderer, and Derek Chauvin is. And I would also say Ahmad Aubry is another perfect example. If Ahmad Aubry was jogging in that town white, he would not have been lynched. And
I'm sure you're right. Nobody says there aren't racists in America. Let me give you another example. 3 weeks before what happened on the New York subway in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a homeless black man walks up to a white guy, shoots him in the back of the head, kills him. Goes to another part of the city, walks up to that white guy, shoots him in the back of the head and kills him. And later on, the black homeless guy admits he did it because both these guys were white.
And that's a hate crime.
I assure you that this is the first time you've ever heard of this, Brian. And that's because the media doesn't give a rip when it doesn't fit their narrative. In fact, the police kill more unarmed white people every year than they kill unarmed blacks. You probably can't even name an unarmed white person who's been killed because the media doesn't care, giving the country the false impression that this happens all the time when it does not. Again, it is rare for the police to kill anybody, let alone an unarmed black person, let alone a non-menacing unarmed black person.
Michael
Brown was unarmed. Michael Brown was unarmed, but his DNA was on the officer's gun.
I have always spoken out against Ferguson, and that was a false narrative. And I also do talk about unarmed white people that are shot and killed. We had somebody out of Costco here years back. I still talk about that case. We're running out of time, but I will say this, Mr. Elder.
The police kill more unarmed white people than they kill unarmed blacks every year. They kill more white people than they kill more black people every year.
But in closing, I will
you've not given me any proof that America remains systemically racist.
Okay, well,
you talk about inequalities, which is not the same thing.
Just because you're killed or not killed doesn't mean that you're not the victim of police brutality or the victim of systemic racism. That's just one stat of many stats. Being pulled over because you're black, being the victim or being harassed because
I already dealt with the facts about being pulled over, and you're wrong. You can't come up with a single study to assert that black people are not paid the same as white people are for the very same work. You have my email. If you have a study, send it to me. You don't have it.
What I'll say to this in closing.
It's rhetoric. It's rhetoric, and you're making the country worse, Brian. And you have no idea you're doing it. You're guilty. You're guilty of being a demagogue on race in America. You don't even realize you're doing it.
I disagree with you, and I think those who defend Donald Trump and defend what took place on January 6th and talk about whataboutism and bringing up Hillary Clinton is a disservice. And I think somebody who is black.
Whataboutism is a lazy term that people on the left use when they want to justify hypocrisy and selective outrage.
Well, listen, we're running out of time. What I was going to say was I appreciate the fact that you're willing to have these discussions and these debates. That's more than I can say of a lot of your Republican counterparts that are unable to or
I can say the same thing about Democrat counterparts. I've been on the air 30 years, and Nancy Pelosi won't come on, Maxine Waters won't come on, Jesse Jackson won't come on. So don't give me this stuff about your counterparts. Talk to me. You're talking to me.
I defend you on that. And that's why I'm saying I appreciate the fact that you're willing to come on a show and have a debate or a discussion. And I think more Democrats should come on shows like yours. I'm with you 100%. Mr. Elder, I would love for you to come back on when we have a little bit more time. I appreciate you taking the time, my friend. And
go to my website, LarryElder.com, $1, 40,000 individual donation to get me on that debate stage on August 23rd.
I have no problem with you being on that debate stage, and I appreciate you taking the time, Mr. Elder. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate that. All right, good spirited debate. I thought we would have that with Mr. Elder, and we definitely did it. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Tomorrow we're going to be live at USA basketball practice at Mendenhall. We appreciate